Coming up, a special One Detroit American Black Journal Roadshow on the big changes coming to the neighborhoods around the old Michigan Central Station now that Ford is moving in.
We're going to talk with residents, with community stakeholders, and with city leaders about the impact of Ford's announcement. One Detroit and American Black Journal on the road starts now.
Support for this program provided by W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Business Leaders for Michigan, dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. And thank you to these supporters. And viewers like you.
Welcome to a special One Detroit American Black Journal Roadshow. I'm Christy McDonald alongside Stephen Henderson. We're at McShane's Pub in Detroit's Corktown neighborhood in the shadow of the historic Michigan Central Station. You know, when Ford announced it had bought the train station, it was a deal that captivated Detroit and the region.
Yeah, it really did. The automaker is transforming what once was the ultimate symbol of decay here in the city. But what will the change mean for the neighborhoods that surround the train station?
We are taking an up-close look at the neighborhoods affected by Ford's new development, the processes in place to make sure the people who live here have a say in what happens next, and how the city and Ford are part of that process.
Over the next hour, we're going to take a deep dive into the impact of Ford's plan to turn the train station into the centerpiece of an innovation hub. The development includes new office, retail, parking, and residential spaces. We're going to take a look at the changes taking place right now in the neighborhoods, the surge in development, and what we can expect in the future. How will life change for the people who live and own businesses in the area? Also coming up, we're going to explore the community benefits package that could be a model for future companies. Plus, we'll get the latest on the project from Ford's development executive, and we'll hear from residents who want to make sure they're getting information every step along the way when it comes to housing, land use, and more.
All right, so let's start off by taking a closer look at the three neighborhoods that are in what's referred to as the impact zone: Corktown, North Corktown, and Hubbard Richard. Each community has its own identity and needs. Take a look. The Michigan Central Station Impact Area, three neighborhoods. Let's start in historic Corktown.
The train station, a huge historical connection to a lot of people, average people, came to this city through those portals, through that entry, that lobby. That's our Ellis Island. But still, it's an iconic piece to Corktown and this area, and to the city and to the region, for crying out loud.
The trains quit stopping here in 1988. Then 3 decades of talk about what to do with the building until 2018.
Oh, I was immediately excited just because someone was doing something with the train station. When they made the announcement, they announced it with a plan.
Before the train station opened in 1914, there was Corktown, the oldest neighborhood in Detroit.
Go get the ball. No!
Dorothy Bennick arrived in 1994. She wanted a historic house in the city.
And everybody that I knew said, "Are you out of your mind?" The front of the house?
Her house, built in 1867, vacant and without a roof in the 1980s, but saved when the neighborhood was designated an historic district.
Yeah, when I moved in, there were a couple people that accused me of gentrification, which I didn't even know what gentrification was. But I couldn't have gentrified because there hadn't been anybody here to kick out. So
A mile-long walk down Michigan Avenue, and you're in the heart of downtown. A walk taken by many working-class immigrants who settled here long ago.
That's why the sign says, founded in 1834, essentially by Corktowners. And they called themselves Corktowners because they had that connection of leaving Ireland through the Port of Cork. It's not because they came from County Cork. They came from all different counties. Can I have a slice of this?
Yeah, hack it off.
Tim McKay moved here in the early 80s.
Okay.
He learned a great-great-uncle helped build the historic apartments he owns. Along with the Irish came Germans, African Americans, Maltese, Latinos, working-class folk. And there was the ballpark, last known as Tiger Stadium.
When Tiger Stadium closed up, the people living here felt great. You know, the newspaper said, oh, Corktown's in danger now. Well, not really. People lived here. We had new houses. The parking lots were looking more like maybe we should build something there.
Corktown, with its mix of homes, restaurants, businesses slogged on, bringing us to a more recent turnaround with storefronts coming back to life. Bob Roberts moved from Ypsilanti to get McShane's Irish pub going next to where Tiger Stadium used to be.
Here we are 8 years later, and now all of a sudden we're geniuses for coming down. We're geniuses and visionaries.
We're projecting that over the next 10 years, we should be preparing for approximately 700 to 1,100 new residential units.
Now come the studies and the reports. Ford, Community Benefits Administrators, and the city holding meetings.
We've got a lot of city staff here today.
This one run by urban planners who say they're about halfway through the process.
This is just to get you thinking. But basically, Corktown's a neighborhood with good bones. It's existing streets, blocks, and shops and parks. It's set out the structure for its future, and one that will play host to new and existing residents, businesses, and visitors. If you like that, let us know. If you hate it, let us know.
To see what's happened is remarkable, but it's also nervous situation.
A slice just southeast.
It's changed in a big way.
When you start bringing in the thousands of people that will work in that facility and other facilities, what will happen to traffic, parking? Are these people going to bring in a economic benefit to the community, or is it going to bring housing and rental prices to the point where you can't afford to be here?
Ford's been great to work with. Their level of community engagement, I think, is better than any other business partner that I've personally ever worked with in my 20 plus years in business.
In my opinion, Ford has done even more than they said they would do.
Corktown resident Deborah Walker likes the Ford Information Center on Michigan Avenue, providing the latest on the construction and what's going on with their autonomous car technology.
They outdid themselves with this information center, and we can use it for community space. We actually have our next block club meeting there.
The challenge now? Determine what the neighborhood needs and what the project could provide. Perhaps a Walgreens or CVS would be nice.
I hope they bring in enough people and they find a perfect location for a small grocery store.
We got a lot of restaurants. You can't buy a pair of affordable socks here. That's going to come. The spillage to the suburbs from this area is in the millions because we had to drive out of town to get clothes.
A lot so far has just been the planning. It's the implementation at the end of the planning that's going to show if the powers that be have listened.
We understand that Michigan Avenue is a major thoroughfare and obviously a large and vibrant commercial district, but that vibrant commercial district is smack dab in the middle of a neighborhood, and we don't want to ever have Corktown lose its Irish, Maltese, and quite frankly, poor history and legacy. We want to maintain that.
A couple blocks behind McShane's, there's I-75. And on the other side of that, the second part of the impact area, North Corktown.
Everybody knows where Corktown is. It's that place where they got those really nice little historic houses, Corktown and North Corktown have really different needs.
Here, so many homes and businesses cleared away. Now it's urban prairie.
A lot of things happened in my 58 years. It was nice when I was a kid because it was all filled up with all kind of different types of architecture. Everything was here, and then it went away.
Last spring, we got together with some North Corktowners at Nancy Whiskey, the neighborhood's only tavern.
We already started making change before Ford came on. We were already on our way, and Ford just blessed us with a little more. The only thing I've noticed more of is notes on my door, do I want to sell my home?
The difference between the blight nowadays, because the developers have an interest in, is market value. You could probably purchase a home for maybe like $250,000, sell your home for $250,000. Whereas when I was growing up in, the 80s and the 90s, you couldn't even give it away,
What I've noticed since I've been there is right across the street, I think there's plans to build a house. I also think my landlord wants to build another house right next to where I'm at. So I'm very aware that things are changing quickly.
Changes like the North Pine Street townhomes, subsidized, affordable for middle-income wage earners, a family making $61,000 to $91,000 a year, something dental hygienists, physical therapists, city workers can afford. Oakland Housing, a nonprofit, broke ground last summer.
The market really can't do it, not because it doesn't want to, but because it costs so much to build right now. It is difficult to build a new home that a middle-income family can afford. It often costs more to build it than they can afford to buy it for.
The challenge for North Corktown, how much more development? The Detroit Land Bank owns a lot of property here. Open space many in this neighborhood would like to keep that way.
That we need to control development as a community and really guide the city's process and demand what we want to see here. And one of those critical components is the open space. And that's one of the reasons I ended up here, because growing up in a, suburban monoculture out in the exurbs, I had a lot of open space as a child. It's one of the precious jewels of the neighborhood.
Back over the freeway and across the tracks past the train station, Impact Area Part 3, the Hubbard Richard neighborhood, which is part of Mexican Town.
That viaduct divides Mexican Town and Corktown.
Susie Garza's been looking at the back of the train station her whole life.
Everything right now is going on for Corktown. They're forgetting the people on this side of the tracks. They're forgetting this area, this neighborhood.
Garza's parents started the tamale store in 1957. Her home only steps away, owned by her parents before she was born. On West Verner, Tamaleria Nuevo Leon sits on the main artery into Mexican Town. When events close streets in Corktown, the traffic's cut off to her neighborhood.
I will notice when I come to work in the morning and I see why are there barricades up under the viaduct? Oh, we have an event going.
Garza says property values rose 4 or 5 times higher after the Ford announcement.
And somebody told me, you could sell it, make some money. Where am I gonna go? This is home. This is all I've known all my life. I have people tell me, when Ford comes here, you have to get ready for them, and and you have to, invest in this and change the menu. I'm gonna change the menu that we've had for 60-odd years. Then I'm not gonna be who I was. I'm not gonna be who they were. Okay?
We should maybe be asking questions, and so let's get prepared.
Another meeting, this one by the Hubbard Richard Residents Association.
I think Ford wants to be a good neighbor. I don't know they know how. And I think we have the opportunity to do our part to help them to understand how to be a good neighbor.
We would love it if they can come more to our neighborhood and talk to us. And in fairness to them, they have shown up to a couple meetings.
And you're talking about having these 4,000, 5,000 jobs, where are they going to park at? Okay? And then they mentioned that they were going to put a parking structure behind the train station. And then that's what I said, so it's going to look nice from the side, from the front. But the people in Mexican Town, Hubbard Richard, we're going to see the other side of the building, and we're going to see a parking structure?
Parking plans are still being worked out, but the word from Ford, the view from Mexican Town won't be obscured. Before Ford arrived, there had already been some efforts to improve the neighborhood. The city's West Verner study included a large swath of southwest Detroit, where Hubbard Richard shows up as just one part.
It seems like we kind of fell between the cracks between the Verner study in Southwest and this new Corktown study that's occurring. And Hubbard Richard shows up in both of those in a fraction. So we're even split from the planning process perspective as to what the impact is. So all the more reason to make sure that there's clear lines of communication and collaboration with the neighborhood and residents.
Respect the community, respect the culture. If you want to put a microbrewery, go put that on Michigan Avenue like everybody else, okay? Respect the area here. You adapt to us, we don't adapt to you, okay?
One of the biggest parts of this project is the creation of a neighborhood advisory council to weigh in with both Ford and the city. We met up with the chair of the advisory council, Sheila Cockrell, and with Tricia Talley, who is president of the North Corktown Neighborhood Association, at our community conversation right here at McShane's. They talked about the needs and concerns of longtime residents and businesses in the impact zone. Impact can mean something good, something positive that people want to have happen. Impact can also mean something that maybe people are not as certain about or not as enthusiastic about. And it can mean changes that people don't necessarily welcome to their communities. So let's start with the two of you talking about, from your perspectives, the positive things that are either happening now or likely to happen as a result of the redevelopment of the train station, and then talk about things that you're maybe a little more apprehensive about.
A big concern in North Corktown is that we have all of this beautiful vacant land, and too much density is a concern for a lot of residents.
So you like the vacant land and you don't want to see it all
not
crowded
all
up
of
with
it, yeah.
Okay.
We don't want to see every stretch of it covered with housing, especially if the housing is not affordable for the people who have weathered the storm. Because at one point, North Corktown was an empowerment zone, designated as an empowerment zone. And if I'm remembering correctly, that was usually, an empowerment zone was usually designated based on how dilapidated the neighborhood was.
Right, those were distressed neighborhoods.
Exactly.
The city said, hey, we're going to focus on trying to bring redevelopment and opportunity to those places.
Right. So we do have the development, but it's not accessible to everyone. I'm learning that there's a difference between affordability and low-income housing, and North Corktown has a mixture of all. So we want to determine how we can include everyone in what's going on in the neighborhood. And I'm hoping that the impact of Ford will spread throughout the city.
Sheila, you were involved with a lot of the negotiations between Ford and the neighborhood about how this should unfold and what kinds of things you wanted to see. Tell us about the upside of that and the potential downside.
I think the first thing, important thing to say is that the Neighborhood Advisory Council took very seriously its responsibility to represent all three neighborhoods, because the neighborhoods are different, have different needs, have different experiences relative to development, services, housing, et cetera. So we made sure in our community benefits agreement that we spoke to the issues that people were concerned about. For example, there was interest in North Corktown to create a sanctuary for the pheasants.
Right.
That's something people in North Corktown wanted to have happen. That's in the development agreement. There was interest in making sure that the agricultural efforts in North Corktown were maintained. Hubbard Richard was very concerned about not having the view of the train station lost to a parking structure. When I guess as chair of the NAC, and we had a great team of really serious people on our council. We had a great working relationship with the planning department, which is key because it's got to be a collaborative relationship, and we had a special partner, in my opinion, with Ford. And let me tell you, the ethos, the ethics, the position that Ford takes as being part of the impact zone and not imposing itself on the impact zone was something that have not generally seen corporations come to the table with that kind of a framework. So it is a collaboration. We look forward to 2020 seeing some of the elements that with our priorities, which is affordable housing, which includes, to your point, Tricia, low-income housing being not only maintained but expanded in the impact zone, making sure that job creation and job training is available to all members of the impact zone. Some of these priorities are going to begin to take shape.
And no downside?
Oh, downsides. Parking is a downside. But parking has been an issue in Corktown. I mean, I grew up here. Parking was an issue because guess what? This part of the impact zone was built before there were cars. So for this part of Corktown, this part of the impact zone, parking is going to be an issue. Resolution, I don't think is here. I also think one of the issues that we're all, an entire impact zone, going to have to deal with is people being priced out. Now, one of the interesting developments, or one of the big interesting issues about that is who are the people who are raising rents? Are they big outside corporations or suburban companies coming in? There's some of that, but there's also people who've lived in whose families have been in this neighborhood for generations, who have a chance to, having been the custodians, having been the protectors of keeping Corktown, this part of the impact zone together, particularly have a chance to reap the benefits. And so people are looking to sell, and that is impacting people's ability to stay. At some point, we need to find throughout the city, in terms of the issue of gentrification, the creation of some kind of pot of money that literally is rent subsidy, or in the alternative, we need to look at, in some situations, legislating rent control so that there's a way to ensure that everybody who wants to be here can stay.
That was going to be my next question, was about displacement or potential displacement because of something like this. I wonder how big a concern that is, both across the freeway and down here on Michigan Avenue. We'll go back to Tricia first to talk about what's happening in North Corktown.
It's a big concern that people are priced out of the neighborhood that they have lived in for 40 years, paid taxes for 40 years, and all of a sudden, because the neighborhood is popular, they're no longer desired residents. And we want everyone to benefit from what's going on in the neighborhood, not just a select few, but everyone. And we want to bring back being able to create generational wealth in Detroit. And home ownership is the number one way to do that. And Detroit at one time was the number one place that, especially an African American,
for single-family home ownership.
Exactly. And
now it's the largest place for single-family rental.
Right, which is ridiculous. Yeah. We don't want people to be priced out, but we haven't figured out how to manage that or how to address that challenge.
Yeah. Sheila, you were part of the negotiations for the Community Benefits Agreement. Talk about what the response was from the people at Ford to this idea of protecting residents who've been here, protecting low-income housing and opportunities for people who might get pushed out by that kind of development.
Sure. Ford put their money where their mouth is, because not only did they say those are all great ideas, they put $11 million in hard cash into the Community Benefits Agreement, and working closely with Arthur Jemison, who's here today, working strategically with he and others, we were able to have Ford put in the agreement that Ford would make contributions to the Strategic Neighborhood Fund and the Affordable Housing Leverage Fund in ways that permits the city to invest more heavily in those dollars in the impact zone. Actually, over 30 years, it'll be a benefit that plays out to $22.5 million worth of investment in housing and in things that directly benefit residents here. Another thing I would say as an aside here in this part of Corktown, Hubbard Richard's had a great resident association for generations, so has North Corktown. In Corktown proper, there have been, since it's the oldest neighborhood in the city, there have been periods where there have been more organization than other. But right now, we have 3 organically developing block clubs, which is really good.
Can I go back, Dorothy? Can you tell us a little bit about,
the block club, and I guess
Sorry,
the feeling, I guess, of you gonna get her up. But the idea of the participation, and do you feel like you're being listened to in a lot of these processes?
Yes, we actually have a number of members that come to every meeting, which we have once a month. We filed our constitution and bylaws, and I will now say we are officially registered with the city as an official block club. And so we will have a voice in what's happening at our end of the world.
My name's Lindsay Matson. I don't live in Corktown, North Corktown, or Hubbard Richard, but I'm a community organizer in Southwest Detroit. So we work with all of the residents of Southwest Detroit, including Corktown, North Corktown, Hubbard Richard. And we just see housing prices skyrocketing, and that can be really great for homeowners, but it can also be really tough on renters. And so we've been working with, especially with renters, thinking about how to make sure that they're protected, encouraging folks who run different apartments, especially low-income housing, to be more transparent with their decision-making. I know there's pressure to sell, pressure to convert to market rate, so thinking about how we can support renters in that.
Okay.
Another issue having to do with housing, particularly in North Corktown, is the land bank. The land bank owns all this vacant property, and sometimes you have to be some sort of classical scholar of some language that I don't know to find out what the land bank's rules are.
I also live in North Corktown, and many neighbors have complained of the lack of transparency and access to the land bank in the past. Hopefully that will change. I myself am a homeowner, and I rent out units, and I did notice a lot of a rapid increase in cold calls for me to sell my building. So I'm assuming that other homeowners might get the same type of cold calls to sell their buildings as well.
So last question I have is, so we've got historic Corktown, North Corktown, Hubbard Richard. So we've got a lot of different organizations all in the same place. And you might assume that there would be competing interests among those organizations. You guys seem to be working together pretty well at this point. Was it always that way, or did you have to iron out some differences?
Well, I think the structure imposed on the Ford development, which is sort of the latest trigger, was to create this impact zone, which I think was a good way to put us all in a position of being more inclined to work together. And I do think that the process that we use, that the time and energy that all of our representatives, on the 9 of us on the Neighborhood Advisory Council, the way we dealt with it, every single idea, anybody gave us an idea, we had a spreadsheet. Everybody's voice was heard. There's a real sense that there's a common interest, and that when there are issues, we need to come together to work them out. So I think that's also been a big feature.
I agree. The common interest is what brought us all together. It was a very tedious process, and we're pretty open about making sure that everyone got the communication about the meetings that were going on. So I didn't see too much disagreement.
I didn't either.
Yeah, because when everyone's voice is heard, I think you can, it's easier to compromise.
Right. A key part of Ford's plan for the train station is the Community Benefits Package. It is continuing to be developed through a series of meetings with neighborhood representatives and the city to develop a comprehensive neighborhood framework plan. It will address planning strategies of urban design and development, streetscape and parks, historic preservation, and housing, as well as Ford's investment in workforce development and job training. But what is a Community Benefits Ordinance, or a CBO? Here's a look at what this relatively new Detroit law means for big development projects like this one.
What do you know about Detroit's Community Benefits Ordinance, the CBO for short, approved by voters in 2016?
So Detroit is the oldest, the boldest, and the coldest when it comes to CBOs. We are the first. Others want to emulate us, and they are not there yet.
Detroit City Council member Scott Benson helped craft the plan, stemming in part from an agreement when Flex and Gate vowed to hire more Detroiters and create a less disruptive truck route at its Eastside Auto Parts factory. Agreements for specific projects like that aren't new here or in other cities, but in Detroit, The CBO is law, making big developers work with the community to find benefits they can offer and reduce negative impacts that might happen.
And it basically ensures that community residents have a voice at the table for all large-scale development projects above $75 million within the city of Detroit.
$75 million, that's the threshold for the CBO to kick in. If that developer gets $1 million in tax breaks for city land, then a neighborhood advisory council is created. The NAC or NAC will work with the developer to come up with community benefits to be approved by Detroit City Council. But who gets on the NAC? 2 are elected by residents of the neighborhood affected. Call that the impact area. 4 are chosen by the city's Planning and Development Department. 2 are selected by at-large city council members. 1 is picked by the local district's city council member. That's 9 total who attend open meetings to negotiate for the community. Among the projects so far falling under the CBO, the Detroit Pistons practice facility in Midtown, Bedrock's downtown Hudson project, the Fiat Eastside Chrysler's plant expansion, and Ford's Michigan Central train station development in Corktown. But let's go back to 2016 when the CBO went to the voters. There were actually 2 CBO ordinances on the ballot. Councilmember Benson's Plan B won, while CBO Plan A lost. Plan A? A grassroots effort led in part by Linda Campbell of the Equitable Detroit Coalition and the Detroit People's Platform.
We have been working on the issue since 2011, just organizing, educating community residents about the Community Benefit Agreement process.
Plan A would have been a lot tougher on developers. The project threshold would have been a lot lower, just $15 million, meaning a lot more projects under the ordinance, which some said would have stifled development within city limits.
Why come and work here? You're going to go to Hamtramck, Highland Park, Royal Oak, or any other municipality where you can get a deal done and not have to go through a process that was so obtrusive that it will grind development to a halt.
A few years in, and some Detroiters are not happy. They want a stronger law, more like the one that lost in 2016.
What do you believe would improve the community benefits process?
At this meeting, they're working on amendments to the CBO.
If you speak with residents, by and large, they will say that the CBO process currently has failed, even though there have been some benefits. But when you look at proportionately the investment in the community benefits versus the payout by way of tax incentives and abatements, it's very, very low.
The proposed amendments include dropping the project threshold from $75 million to $50 million, holding more community meetings, and making potential NAC members disclose relationships they may have with developers.
Those folks who have these kind of powerful connections with developers, with city administration, or with city council, that those folks don't serve, because those are pretty powerful connections that crowd out the voice of everyday Detroiters.
Councilmember Benson says he's seen Detroit lose projects because developers don't like the CBO. Oh well, still, he'd like to keep it pretty much the way it is.
But we have to do something that works. We can't run all development away, and we can't just willy-nilly bring development in and not take into account the voices of the residents who would be impacted.
As it stands now, the proposed amendments could soon be presented to the Detroit City Council for it to decide.
It's not a silver bullet. It's not going to address all of the problems with economic development or the inequity in economic development in the city, but it is one strategy, and it's a strategy that's rooted in the belief that if we have to pay, which is our public money, we should have a say.
We invited Arthur Jemison, the city's group executive for planning, housing, and development, and Detroit City Council member Raquel Castaneda-Lopez to our neighborhood meeting. They talked about the Community Benefits Ordinance and other matters related to the Ford deal. Nolan Finley has that part of the conversation.
The rationale for a community benefits agreement. Why should the city be asking developers for community benefits agreements, and why isn't the development itself a community benefit in terms of creating economic activity, jobs, spin-off businesses, opportunities in the neighborhoods?
I think it goes back to how do you define community? And I'm a big believer that developers are part of the community. And so not only does a community benefits process behoove, so quote unquote, the community, it also benefits developers. From all the developers I've talked to from my short time on council, if they knew from day one, this is what we're gonna have to do, they're like, okay, we're gonna build this into our pro forma, we're gonna figure out how we incorporate this to the extent that they can, and they're much more willing to work with folks. When you get thrown something, I think all of us can relate to this at the end when you've like finalized your application for a mortgage or for college or whatever, and it's like now you have this additional requirement, it makes it much more difficult for developers to comply, and I think then they resist at that point. So from both the development side as well as the community side, I've heard that yes, we're willing to come to the table and engage. It's really the process and how that happens, which is I think the challenge, and it's flawed with the current legislation that we have today. I think the other piece of it that's missing, and I speak about this very publicly on council as someone who's a third-generation Detroiter who grew up in poverty, that the conversation around economic development can't solely focus on creating jobs, because we know there's many people who are employed that are still living below the poverty line, and that there's other things, especially in my district, that have to do with air quality and health, access to transportation, like many folks have spoken about access to affordable housing. For me, those aren't benefits, those are minimums, those are standards that we should be fighting for as a local municipality. And anyone who comes to the table, it's like, hey, these are our values that we run and kind of guide ourselves as a city. If you're in alignment with those, we'd love to have you come. But if you're not, and you're going to displace people or create pollution or offer jobs that really aren't accessible to Detroiters, then maybe this isn't necessarily going to be the best partnership for us to engage with.
How do you manage the expectations of the community in terms of a business not be able to come in here and solve every problem, and convince businesses that investing in a community beyond their development is good for them?
Whenever there's a new expectation or a piece of new permitting requirement, as was the case with the Community Benefits Ordinance, I think it takes time for people to say one of the major impediments to development is uncertainty, and so whenever there's a new thing introduced and no one's done it before, there's a lot of uncertainty. And I would certainly say that in the case of Ford and FC and some of the other larger ones, there's a lot of uncertainty because has this been done successfully with a large-scale project? So I think the uncertainty is a major point. I think once people understand what it takes to get your project fully permitted and entitled in a city, they make an economic decision about whether they're going to be able to do it or not, and they bake in and make assumptions about whether or not they're going to be able to meet the requirements of a CBO. We try to identify for them ways that the city and state, in some cases the federal government, can support them meeting the interests that the people in the community have identified. Sometimes projects, I bet you some projects are going to end up being a little bit smaller than they might have been. They might take a little bit longer than they might have. And again, I think the question is always, is the right balance being achieved? I think so far we've been able to do that, but again, it has come from working hard with the members of the council, working hard with people like Sheila, who led the NAC, from lots of volunteers and others who have been part of expressing their opinions at these meetings. It comes from the balance of keeping all those things together.
Councilwoman, Detroit's already a high-cost city to develop, and labor costs have jumped a third over the past couple of years.
That's true.
Do you have any worry that the CBO adds another layer of cost that might make the city non-competitive for the sort of developments you want to see here?
No, none at all. I think it's the lack of clarity and confusion that the current process creates. The thing is, the people who have been here in the city of Detroit have sustained the city, and there's benefits to developers coming in. There's a brand that internationally people kind of want to be a part of. This larger movement, the grit, the perseverance, whatever you use to describe that people want to come here. Now, financially, may it be more costly? Yes, I recognize that that's a reality. However, there are other benefits that you get by coming and investing in the city city of Detroit. And I think too often we operate from this place of scarcity and from fear. And Chief Jemison knows this because I say this all the time. What would it look like to lead from a place of hope and working towards what we actually want to achieve versus being reactionary and responding and be like, oh, well, if we don't do this, they're not going to come here and we won't create these jobs. Versus, and I always think of Copenhagen as a great example in the EU, in a very different place now, but 20 years ago, they were on the verge of bankruptcy in a very similar situation to we are. They have built into their code and their policies the minimums kind of expectations of what they'd like to see developers come to the table with. Now, they're in a different position in terms of negotiating. However, they started from that place. And now when developers come, they know we have to include this amount of affordable housing, this amount of public space, this amount of access to public lighting. And if that was built in, I do think it would be a much easier conversation if it was institutionalized versus community after community having to negotiate.
So, Arthur, when you look at the concerns some of the folks here have had about affordable housing, I mean, that has to be a preoccupation of yours, because you got a place like Corktown. I mean, the basic economic laws, supply and demand, are at work. Demand for housing goes up, supply stays relatively stagnant, prices go up. How do you assure that you have a community that's open to everybody?
Sure. So you do that by creating new housing and preserving existing affordable housing in communities. So this is an area, as you said, it's been a preoccupation. Since 2018, we have preserved 4,000 existing affordable housing units, and we have developed about 400 new affordable housing units. We've done that not only using our city and state resources and passing legislation with the help of the council that sets aside money that's made when we sell commercial property and puts it into deeply subsidized affordable housing. But in this case, in the Ford CBO, $2.5 million was allocated. It's going to be invested in preserving and creating new affordable housing in this community. And that money, because it's been committed by Ford and some of it's already been received, can be turned into to leverage state money through tax credits and others, and really double or triple its value in a development. So it's our plan to identify sites in the neighborhood where we can develop more affordable housing, using some of that land that belongs to the land bank, using some of the land that belongs to the city, and making sure that if there's existing, broken down housing or even naturally occurring affordable housing, work with those owners to get those units preserved.
Go ahead.
I'm ignorant for the whole process, but I would like to ask about the availability of food. Is anything being done about ensuring that it's reasonably priced and supermarkets so that the folks that are in the areas can get to the food of any income level?
I don't think that there were specific requirements in any of the stuff that we've done that have to do with sort of healthy food and new supermarkets in the area. But I understand your concern, and I think there's...
I will say something separate that comes up in the conversations around community benefits and these larger deals is just access to the space in general, and access being more that I can physically be there, but are these spaces that are being created actually servicing my needs? And I think with Ford, we had conversations with them very honestly, like, yes, we'd like to see you open more retail, but do we really need another restaurant? I mean, people have nowhere to go to buy underwear or to buy their medicine or to maybe shop for local groceries. And I think each neighborhood is slightly different in terms of what they're missing in terms of basic neighborhood goods and services. But I think that's also part of the conversation is as companies come in and they are opening up retail space, how do they make sure it's affordable for local business owners and Detroit business owners specifically? And how do they make sure that the businesses that they're opening are actually servicing the need of the people in that community and they're not pricing overpriced so that people can actually buy the goods that they're selling?
Look out 10 years and tell me your ideal vision of Corktown.
Corktown, historically, this was a neighborhood of immigrants because immigrants and people of color could only live in certain places. So that sense of community, that sense of, I think, that work ethic, I would love to see preserved. And really, rather than focusing just on the core, which you see so many cities do around the world, really focusing on having almost like, small hubs. So each neighborhood you can walk, you can bike to church, to school, to grocery store, to the pharmacy, et cetera, and that you don't have to drive to some other destination to have your basic needs fulfilled.
Arthur, what do you see in this neighborhood in 2030?
In 2030, the good news is I see some similar things. I might describe them differently, but I really see people walking on Michigan and some of the streets leading up to Michigan, and as a way of going to buy groceries, going to get their dry cleaning, doing the everyday things that we do in our lives. But the streets being a little bit, and this is going to sound controversial, but being a little bit busy. Like, oh, there's a lot of people on the street today.
I hope smooth, too, here.
Exactly. I also want, I imagine people walking in and out of and working in that building.
All right, let's turn now to Ford's role in all of this. The company has been meeting with the Neighborhood Advisory Council and community groups to get input on its big investment in Detroit's oldest neighborhood. I spoke with Mary Culler, the Ford executive who's guiding the redevelopment of the Michigan Central Station.
I would imagine that people still come up to you and say, I never thought I'd see the train station be brought back to life like this.
Yeah, it's amazing how this project has really inspired not only Detroit, but the world. I can't tell you how many letters we get, how many people say, I just want to get involved. How can I get involved? It's so wonderful. I mean, Bill Ford's vision for what this is has really, I think, instigated a lot of people to think about how we can solve problems in Detroit that haven't been solved.
And what problems would those be? Kind of give us an example of some of the things you've been talking about with the people that live around in the area.
Access to transportation is a huge issue for Detroit. And I think people forget that they really think about the congested cities, but we have to think about the problem here in Detroit as well. I mean, one of the number one ways to get out of poverty is to give people access to transportation, to jobs, to education. And so that is absolutely something we're very, very focused on in this innovation district.
Let's talk a little bit about this process of, while Ford is coming in and doing this, taking a look at the neighborhoods in the surrounding area, Corktown, North Corktown, Hubbard Richard. What have the conversations been like from Ford's perspective and talking to people about what they want to see and what maybe could happen in their neighborhoods once, Ford is in and up and running?
They've been really terrific because we've learned a lot. So for example, early days, Southwest wanted no parking deck that was going to mar their view of the station. I mean, think about it. For them, that's the front of the station. So that was one thing we pivoted away from right away so that they would not have an obstructed view. Other folks have really talked about important issues like housing and job training and other issues. And so we're definitely listening to them and we're trying to support those kinds of programs.
Yeah, because it's difficult when people are living in certain neighborhoods. They think, am I going to be priced out of my neighborhood?
Absolutely.
Because everyone will want to live in Corktown now because of the revitalization that Ford is bringing in at the train station. Those are real issues. What kind of conversations or what kind of, communication have you had with the city as well in kind of working hand in hand with the project?
We're very much a part of the low-income housing fund that they're putting together. They've actually identified properties in the Corktown neighborhood where they want to stabilize the rents because that's a really important aspect to ensure that people stay in the neighborhood that they've been in for a very long time. So these are conversations that we actually have every day. So it's not just a construction project, it's really an opportunity to think about these policy issues that frankly every city wrestles with and figure out how to solve them in a different way.
What about education, job training, that sort of things? Are there any kind of specific programs or special programs that are being put aside or funding being put aside for that?
We actually have a philanthropic arm, the Ford Fund. So we've been doing these kinds of programs for years in Detroit. And so now what we want to do is leverage those programs to help the Corktown area, but also there's programs that we're working on with the city. So obviously we've started job training programs. We're going to need to be hiring people with specialized skills. Frankly, they don't exist anymore. When you think about the masons, no one does masonry work anymore. And so we're training actually high school students now to be able to do the masonry work in the station. And that's a really exciting program.
Talk to me about what Ford, how they feel about some of the community benefits things that are happening right now and how this is maybe a larger example for what other companies could be looking at.
So I actually think our process was really fantastic. I actually went to every single meeting. I went to every single Community Benefits Ordinance meeting. I think we had 11 of them. And we heard from the community and we really built the program together. And what came out of that was not only our commitment from a funding perspective and a programmatic perspective, but for example, we ended up opening an information center at the corner of Rosa Parks in Michigan, where everyone from the community can come and see the development and provide us with ideas, provide input, and really come along on the journey with us, because I think the most important thing is to communicate and to ensure that we're all kind of respecting each other's point of view.
We had a community meeting in Corktown, and it was transparency. And it was the whole thing of just being able to understand and see what's happening step by step and not feel that they were blindsided by any decisions that were being made. And so far, people
feel really receptive. They feel that they have been part of the process. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I mean, think about it. You feel that way about anything that happens to you as well, right? We just want to be communicated with and to understand the process. And so, for example, we brought them in probably a couple months ago to show them some areas on the exterior of the train station where we'd love to provide a public amenity. And they had an input in what they'd want to see there. Would they want to see a park? Would they want to see a place where you could just come and hang out? But they were designing that with us. And I think that's really important because at the end of the day, these are going to be spaces for them. And we want to make sure they really love them.
Do you think that other companies are looking at this and saying, look at what Ford is doing, we could do something like that in Detroit? Do you believe that Ford's investment has maybe opened the eyes of other heads of corporations around the world saying, maybe Detroit might be the place?
Well, you know, I think Bill Ford's vision is really interesting because his whole idea is to bring others in. And, you know, we talked to the city and they've said to us that you've inspired other people to come here, which we love. But my hope is that we're going to bring people to this project and have them be part of our ecosystem and then inspire others to come as well. But I do think it's happening. I mean, obviously Detroit is only the best place to be.
So now that Ford is planning to drive the future of transportation in an urban Detroit setting, what are the residents hoping to see in the coming years? We heard what was on their minds at our community conversation.
And Stephen, I'm going to call you back up here too, and Nolan, you can't run away. But if anyone would like to describe how they feel that they're going to be able to describe their neighborhood to someone 5 years from now, how do you hope to be able to describe where you live 5 years from now?
It's a bustling, healthy community where people are welcome and they can come and find work if they want to, and it's affordable living. So, come on.
All right. Anyone else? How would they describe it? How they want to describe it 5 years from now?
I would like a 20-minute neighborhood where I can walk, a 20-minute walk, I could get my laundry done, I could get groceries that I won't have to sell a kid to purchase because Whole Foods is ridiculously expensive, and that it's safe.
Take the kids to school?
Yeah. A great community where everyone is welcome, no matter what your income is. And we're all just living and enjoying 5 years from now.
Well, I'm coming back to the block club. You know I am. And 5 years from now, what do you want your neighborhood? How do you want to describe your neighborhood?
There are no new neighbors. They're all old, that they all just become part of it. That's the whole idea of a neighborhood, is that when somebody moves in, you know who they are, they know who you are. It's not like you keep eyes on everybody, but you become a community.
Okay, thanks. Anyone else before we kind of wrap things up a little bit?
Anytime we do these roundtables, no matter where it is, I think the theme is similar and the conflicts are similar. Change is hard, change is disruptive, and change has to be managed in a way that doesn't frighten people and makes people feel included and safe.
And do you think, Stephen, the city has done a better job in the last 10 years of when there is change in neighborhoods? Is there been a better job done listening to what the people who live in the neighborhoods really want to see?
I think there is better infrastructure now to be able to allow people to have a voice in the process of change than there has been, right? And there are a number of reasons that's true. One is the Community Benefits Ordinance, which was pretty controversial when it was passed, but I think if you look at the examples of where it's been used, it really has given people a voice that they didn't have before. It's not perfect. There are some tweaks that probably need to be made. And then the approach of the administration and the council to these things, I think, has changed pretty dramatically as well. And so change looks different in the city now than it did 10 or 15 years ago. And it looks different in every neighborhood, and that's the way it should be, because every neighborhood has their own idiosyncrasies and differences that should be taken into account when dramatic change happens.
And Nolan, after covering news here for what, 30 years, 35 years, 40 years, 50 years, we're going to keep adding, and especially business, what are you going to be looking for in the next 2 years in terms of storylines and things that you guys are going to be covering?
Well, I think in terms of development, I mean, there's still a lot of vacant land that people are sitting on. That's true in the downtown core, starting to be true in neighborhoods like this one. As people sense a heat, they start speculating, start hanging on to land. The cities, there's a demand for for property in Detroit. There's demand for development. The city's going to have to do a better job of encourage people either to put their land to use or get off of it.
Stephen, what are you going to be looking for in the next couple of years?
I mean, I think the challenge in Detroit right now is the development of human capital, right? We are turning the corner in terms of investment in property, in development and things like that, and becoming a more sort of normal space for those things. But we still are leaving a lot of our residents behind by not matching that investment in them. It's really great to see how that is playing out here in Corktown with Ford. I think that's being accounted for in a really important way. You still have a lot of communities in the city where that's just not happening the way that it should yet.
And I think talent development, human development's a key. There is enough money coming into Detroit right now in terms of development. I think last figure I heard was $8 or $9 billion, either underway and coming in the future. That's enough money to greatly reduce poverty in the city, to put a lot of people into work, to rebuild the strong middle class this city once had.
And a lot of training programs.
It should be our goal.
And that's going to do it for this special One Detroit American Black Journal Roadshow on the community impact of Ford's Michigan Central Station project. Thanks so much for watching.
Our thanks also to McShane's Pub for having us, and to the residents in the impact area who came out for our community conversation.
Yeah, we will continue to bring you more in-depth coverage of this story and other topics that matter to our community. Just go to onedetroitpbs.org for all the stories that we're working on right now.
And as always, you can connect with us on Facebook and on Twitter. We'll see you next time.
Support for this program provided by W.K. Kellogg Foundation, a partner with communities where children come first. The Cynthia and Etzel Ford Fund for Journalism at Detroit Public TV.
Masco Corporation is proud to manufacture innovative and environmentally friendly products for the home. Delta faucets, craft-made in Merillat cabinets, and Behr brand paints have all been designed with you in mind. Masco and its family of companies, serving Michigan communities since 1929. The DTE Foundation is a proud sponsor of Detroit Public TV, among the state's largest foundations committed to Michigan-focused giving. We support organizations that are doing exceptional work in our state. Visit dtefoundation.com to learn more.
Business Leaders for Michigan, dedicated to making Michigan a top 10 state for jobs, personal income, and a healthy economy. And thank you to these supporters. And viewers like you.